Hello and welcome to Kirtan London Journey to Joy podcast, episode number 15, maybe 16, I'm not sure, with your guests today, myself, Madhva, and we're joined again by our very, very special guest, none other than Acyuta Gopi, who was with me for the last episode as well. And we are continuing, or rather probably starting chapter 8 today, because we tried to start chapter 8 last week or 2 weeks ago, and we had a whole digression discussion talking about the author of the book rather than the content of the book. And so it feels as though we'll be starting chapter 8 of the Bhagavad-gita today. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you, Acyuta, for joining us again. Apologies, I'm late. If any of you were waiting to join us, it's 15 minutes late. I didn't even know it's Wednesday today. Totally spaced out. And Acyuta has been extremely patient. So thank you, Acyuta, and thank you for joining us.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. And I feel like that authenticity is needed. So I kind of want to thank you for at least even say, like, if it were me, I'd been like, the internet did it.
What? I make mistakes. I realized a while ago it's just easier to say I accept them and move on. I don't believe you when you say that, Acyuta. You strike me as someone who probably firstly wouldn't make the mistake, but secondly, if you did, I can imagine you dealing with it really well. I used to tell lies like that. You know those white lies?
Yeah.
When you feel bad about something, you don't want people to know the truth, and you tell a white lie. And it's taken me 32 years of life to realize, just tell the truth, yo. People will be cool with it. People will accept it.
I mean,
it's what it is.
I feel like that in itself is like a bhagavad-gita lesson, like just go with it, accept it. Let's figure it out from there. And usually 9 times out of 10, not just people, but God as a whole tends to be really okay with it.
Yeah. We all do it, right? We all make mistakes. Yeah. So why are we trying to hide from it? But I definitely feel as though I need the invocation today to ground me, because I was panicking. Acyuta probably was thinking, oh God, what are we going to talk about for the next hour with this dude off his nut? Because I was a little bit flustered that I was late. Acyuta messaged me saying, hey, I'm waiting on the Zoom link. It just says waiting for host to start meeting. And I thought, damn it. But I'm feeling better now. But I do think we need the invocation to help ground. So as you know, we always start with an invocation on this podcast. The reason we do that is because the podcast is somewhat of a spiritual inquiry. It's a spiritual inquiry. So both myself and Acyuta are inquiring into spirit, into what the Gita, the wisdom that the Gita has to offer us, both in our material lives, but even more than that, our spiritual lives. When we do an activity like this, in the Bhakti Yoga cultural tradition, we always start with a prayer or a mantra, which we offer to our teachers who have given us this knowledge or these practices. And we offer them our gratitude and we ask for their blessings. And so it's also a very, very grounding experience to chant these mantras if you focus on them. And I need a bit of that right now.
Let's do it. I'll do it.
Do you mind if I pass it to you, Acyuta?
Sure.
Okay.
Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you. I feel better.
Same. Not that I was even feeling bad. I was just kind of like, we're just going to go with it. Let's see what happens.
I can see we already have 2 guests with us, at least 2 with us on YouTube.
Nice.
So hello to Lileshwari and hello to Veena. Veena's awesome, Acyuta. Veena's part of we have a Monday morning japa group that started this year. Beginning of this year, Kirtan London did a 1-month japa challenge every day for the month of January. At 6:30 in the morning, we'd get together and chant for half an hour. And there was consistently almost 40 people that would turn up every morning to do that.
Wow.
And a small number of us have continued once a week after January finished because there was so much appreciation for that month. And Veena's one of those people. She's really a solid core, really sweet person who's part of that Monday morning group. So hello, Veena. Nice to see you. Apologies for being late.
That is so wonderful. My goodness. Like, that's really cool. Like, and also like a challenge that I think is like really awesome. Like, wow, try that again.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was so cool. I was in awe at how many people wanted to turn up at 6:30 every morning and chant. Yeah, it was incredible.
Wow.
So Chita, I'd like to again, I feel as though last week 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about, we started on chapter 8, but we spent most of the time talking about the author, which was a great digression. So I was thinking we could dive straight into the text. We can dive straight into where we can pick up from where we left off last time. Which one of the early texts. Do you remember which text it was by any chance? Where we
were just around text 2, text 3, and we can just continue from there.
Yeah, let's pick up from there. Is there anyone particularly you had in mind?
We had already gone through text 2, so I figure we can start with text 3.
Amazing. All right, I'll let you kick it off. If you don't mind, if you're happy to do that.
Yes, let's do it. I'm ready. I'm here for it. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "The indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities." I think as Krishna kids, we hear that word a lot. That's another like term, fruitive activities. And
right.
What, like we kind of made this term to fit this this wider umbrella, but like fruitive activities, like I know these are words in English, but what do they even mean? Like what, it almost sounds like ingredients. Like you're looking at a bag of like chips or something, it's like in there, it's like fruitive activities, like a little added.
Like fructose syrup.
Yeah. So finally I kind of just, okay, what is this? What is the point that we're trying to get to? And fruitive activities, basically the stuff that you do for a reason, right? All the stuff that we do for a reason. So sometimes, you can think you've done a favor for somebody. And that favor should not fall under the umbrella of fruitive activities, right? It shouldn't be like tit for tat. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. We kind of think of that like business deals. And going into the wider range of life, when we look at our spirituality in terms of business deals, that's not so fulfilling. When we look at our spirituality in terms of, wait, but this is unconditional, without terms and conditions, without fine print. I'm diving in to try and figure out the truth about me and the universe and the supreme being, if there is one, and not because I want something from that supreme being, but because I really want to figure out my place in this grander scheme of things. It changes from just karmic activities, stuff you do as a business transaction, like I'll worship God if you give me my Ferrari. And it now turns into this real idea of spirituality that I think that Krishna is kind of moving towards in this Bhagavad-gita trajectory, right? He's been giving Arjuna the lowdown on all this stuff. You do good, good comes back to you. You do bad, bad comes back to you. He's like laying these foundational things. He's like, but he's also giving these little hints like, okay, but there could actually be something even more than this that we're like missing. And he's trying to like whet Arjuna's appetite. Like, okay, like there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do, but also when you get into the point where we're at, because with Arjuna, it's almost like knowing advanced calculus without even thinking about addition and subtraction. Arjuna's at this high level of spirituality. He's already got this vision that this supreme person is his family member, his friend, his trusted companion. And that's like highest level. He's at a point where he's like, okay, I'll listen to you, Krishna, because you're my everything. But then Krishna's like, okay, let me work backwards and show you what the path could have been. Right? Like you've got this idea, you're going to go into the forest, you're going to be this advanced spiritualist. Let me show you how hard that path is without the advanced notion of just doing things for the love of it. And that is really, really important, I think, as a culture that relies so much on like social media. We think about creativity and who we are as creatives or who we are as spiritual people. And a lot of that is, okay, are the realizations that I'm having just for this post and just so I can get more followers? Or is the realization that I'm having, I'm now pushed and pulled to share it because it made that much of an impact on me? So, we can even look at our social media, what we ingest and what we put out as, is it fruitive activities? Are we in a business transaction? Are we looking at it like, okay, my feed has to look a certain way, my posts have to look a certain way, I have to phrase it this way, and this is because I want something from these people, either more followers or a job or whatever it is, however they see me? Or am I doing this because I felt this revelation so incredibly that I just want to share it? And it doesn't have to be a big shift, but it does wonders for the mind. Because the mind, when we do things just for the business transaction, the mind starts to jump in and tell us all kinds of things. And we find ourselves being really dissatisfied. When we start to do things when we start to do things for the love of it, which we'll get to, but when we start to do things for the love of it, because we feel so pulled by this revelation and this process of spirituality coming from within us, then we find such a greater degree of joy and bliss and happiness that is not dependent on how many likes are then got by whatever post. So yeah, I mean, Krishna being able to break down, we have this transcendental living entity, Brahman, And then we have the self. And why is that important? Because those two are linked, right? Those two are forever linked. You have Brahman, you have Para Brahman, like the supreme person, but we're also completely linked to the self, which means that that indestructible nature, that opulence, that abundance, that self-satisfaction, all of those opulences that are in the supreme person are also in some small form found within the self, every single self, which is kind of good for us because that means that our truest selves are indestructible. There's nobody else that can tear it down. There's nobody else that can say, hey, you don't belong. There's nobody else that can say, hey, you are not allowed to do this or this or this. And that abundance of happiness and joy and bliss and all of those things that we are actually searching for, it's innately there. It like comes with the hardware. It's like there are certain things that come with a Mac and you expect it to do certain functions. Like sometimes you're going to have to activate it, but it's going to come with the hardware. So this, you know, Satchidananda, this knowledge, this bliss, this eternality of the self comes with the hardware. Now it depends on whether or not we know how to activate it and if we can activate it. And that's where I think Arjuna is at this point.
Okay, so firstly, I'm aware, by the way, I apologize if there's a lag because I know my internet connection where I am. I'm in Spain, by the way. I'm on holiday in Spain. So I think my internet connection here is not so great. So apologies if there's a lag because I'm trying to respond to you, Acyuta, and you might be hearing me a couple seconds late. I don't know. And it might come through like that on the live stream as well. My apologies if that's the case. But back to your point, this is amazing. You've said so many nice things here. And I wanted to pick up on this. I want to talk about fruitive activities because you made me think of a question, which was, why is it even a thing? Because the way you were talking about it made me feel as though we don't want to be doing fruitive activities. We want to be moving away from that. We want to be moving toward selfless activity rather than business transactions and things for ourselves. So why is that? What's wrong with fruitive activities? Because that's how we all think. We're all thinking, always thinking about ourselves and trying to do stuff for ourselves. That's just life. But right now you're saying that I should be switching that up, thinking about something else. So what's wrong with that? Yeah.
And that's actually that's a really cool question, which is why I love doing these with you because they bring up like things that I didn't even like. I'm like, oh yeah,
yeah.
So yeah,
it was a real question for me. Okay, it's like, okay, so I like doing stuff for myself. What's wrong with that, yo?
Yeah, and you know, it also like there's 2 points. There's okay, what's so bad about fruitive activities? Why can't that be the end all be all? But also, what's the difference between selfless activities and self-sacrificing activities? Because sometimes they're not the same,
right?
And sometimes they're still not great, you know, like.
Yeah.
So for the first point about fruitive activities, they become so dependent on outside variables. So it's like, you know, I'm going to do this, or even, you know, like with social media, I'm going to make this post and my post is going to look a certain way and A plus B equals C. But then what happens if it's not getting the likes? What happens if it's not getting the engagement that you think it should? What's happening if it's not getting the response that you have banked on? Now, we are so attached to the results. And so that's the thing about fruitive activities. When we're doing something to get something, we become so attached to the results that if we don't get those results, it can mess up our day. It can mess up our whole mindset.
Yeah.
We start wondering, is this even the path for me? Like, what am I getting out of this? And it's not bad to want to get something out of it. Like we often think about in spirituality, a fear is if I surrender, if I give all this to this personality, what's left for me? Is there anything left for me? And I think that that's why it's so important, even in that 4th chapter, where Krishna is like laying the foundations of, but as everybody surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. Like, you take 1 step towards me, I'll take 1,000,000,000 towards you, no problem. And that, I think, is primarily to like console Arjuna and really allay his fears that, don't worry, surrender doesn't mean that you get left behind. Surrender doesn't mean that I take everything and you're left with nothing. He's like, when it comes to me, surrender means you give me 10, I'll give you back 1,000.
Yeah.
So surrender with in terms of Vedic society means you only get growth. You get loads upon loads more back than you could ever imagine. The business transaction side of it, though, it's like you're kind of on your own. You know, like you're kind of left to your own devices. They use the example of a mother monkey and a mother like lioness.
I love this example.
Yeah, so they say with the monkey, right? A mother monkey will hop from roof to roof, go and swing from trees, and the baby monkey has to hold on.
Yeah.
Baby monkey's got to hold on, and if that baby monkey lets go, it might fall. Now the mom will come back for it, but it's got to hold on of its own accord. What they say the difference is with the lioness is the lioness will pick up the cub. Now the cub is completely surrendered. Like at that point, when you pick up a feline animal by the scruff of the neck, it kind of like short circuits, can't do anything, has to surrender. Like, we're just going along for the ride. And and so the lioness has this baby, and they're gonna carry it wherever they need to go. And so they say that, you know, this is the difference between like this karmic activity where we're kind of on our own. Like, I'm the boss, I'm gonna do the things, but then you've got to hold on. Like, it's up to you to hold on to these results and try and fix them and try and make them work. And that's impossible. Or we get into the realm of surrender. Surrender has us like the lioness and the cub. Lioness and the cub, once we start surrendering to like divine arrangement and all of this divine will, which is actually, fun fact, not completely against us, does not want us to lose in life. When we are able to surrender, then we become held. We become like, it's not of our own accord anymore. And also, when we get that selfless activity, we're not so attached to the results that it ruins all of our progress. Also, this doesn't mean that we should be doormats.
Right. Nice point. I like that. Because surrendering, so this ties into what you were saying before about how do we know what's selfless service and what's becoming a doormat. Because what I'm hearing here is that surrender, and perhaps another way I would do that is say that, and you've said this as well, is service. So trying to dovetail our actions to become service to a higher power rather than just fruitive activities, things we're doing for ourselves all the time. Selfish actions versus selfless actions. Now, I've also experienced this. This makes sense to me because I can feel it. I felt it in my life when I'm trying to create an intention with my actions of service and an intention with my actions of doing something for a higher purpose versus just constantly doing things for myself. I feel the difference in my life. So it makes sense to me at this point. And this is a natural byproduct question that comes from that. How do you know when it's service versus how do you know? Because you do see this sometimes. Spiritual people, they take to the path, they learn this concept about service, selflessness, and then they become doormats because they haven't fully understood it. And in the long run, they become resentful about what they chose to do.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that? How do you differentiate between becoming a doormat and actually living your highest purpose and being living in service?
Yeah. I think what you said about your experience was the most important point. Like, you're like, I feel the difference. I've felt it. And I think that what I love about Bhagavad Gita is Krishna never tells Arjuna to abandon himself or what he knows to be true inside. Drop down beyond the immediate desires and think about, okay, like, what is it that I know to be true? And sometimes, you get religions and the first thing you do is just like abandon that whole like thinking separately thing. And that's what I really love about this chapter and all of the chapters. It's like Arjuna is encouraged, ask questions, have doubts, but also never abandon that deepest knowing. And Krishna makes point after point after point, because it's like, well, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? It's coming from the truest self, which is always connected to that supreme person. So, you get people, and I really, really love this analogy where they say, never abandon your truest knowing and those deepest desires. And some people say it's like, well, what if I have a desire to go drinking every night? Like, what if I have a real desire for all of that drinking? Do you think I should follow it? Or does that just make me an alcoholic? And it's like, but that's not the deepest desire. The surface desire is the alcohol. Why? Keep asking why. Why? Is there a desire for connection? Is there a desire for escape? Those tune into the deepest knowing. That's the deeper knowing that Krishna is talking about, not just the surface thing. Because he says, he's like, from contemplating the objects of the senses, then lust arises. And when you get that hardcore desire for it, and then it's not met, there's a whole slew of like, it goes downhill after that. But he's like, but no, he's like, but tune in to what's deeper than that. Sure, there's the objects of the senses, there's all the stuff you want to do, but why? And I feel like that will help us acknowledge the difference between service and being a doormat. If it doesn't feel right, and if you feel like, if somebody gives you a reaction and you're like, oh, that didn't feel right, it doesn't matter if they've been chasing this spirituality decades longer than you. Figure out why. Ask yourself, okay, why doesn't that feel right? And if it feels like there's been a level of disrespect there, or whatever the case is, follow that. And it doesn't mean you have to create a whole like, confrontation or issue, but it's okay for you to know within yourself that, okay, then I either have to find a different place to serve, or I have to find a different way to serve.
Yeah. Great answer. Great answer. I love that. And I love that it touched on, because it was such a practical example. Have you looked into nonviolent communication before?
I have.
NVC? Yeah. It felt like that when you were saying, okay, I want to go drinking every day, but what's the deeper emotion? Or if you've ever done counseling, I've done counseling quite a bit in my life. And the same thing, this is the same thing they talk to you about, is what's the deeper thing going on under the surface? And I realized that I'm often very, very disconnected from what the deeper thing is. I didn't know what the deeper thing was for a long time. I was only ever connected to the surface level thing that was happening within my psyche or my body. And it took hard work learning to become vulnerable enough to go to the deeper thing and acknowledge whatever that need was. But I love that. I love that you touched on that as well as the example, because it's so important that people learn to do that.
And what I love is what you said. You're like, I was so disconnected from this for a long time, and I'm like, who else was? Arjuna. Like, the amazing thing is this whole thing starts because he's like, oh, I don't want to fight. And Krishna's like, well, that's not true. I've grown up with you. You love doing this. This is what you were made for. And he's like, I don't want to do this. He's like, that's not true. Okay, what's going on? Like, what's deeper than that?
Yeah.
He's like, because you do want to, he's like, you want to defend your family. You do want to protect your family. And this is necessary to protect your family. So what's happening?
Yeah.
He's like, well, okay. And then he gets deeper. And finally, Arjuna has to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't want to kill everybody that I love. What happens when everybody's then looking at me going, okay, this is all your fault. I'm a widow because of you. My kids are orphans because of you. All of this is happening because of you. He's like, and then how am I supposed to be happy ruling people who are miserable because of me? And finally, Krishna's like, okay, well, are you actually the controller? Because what happens if you leave it to those guys who are already mistreating your family, mistreating your wife, abusing the people that you love? Is that a better alternative? And so he's like, well, no. He's like, okay, then let's get in touch with what's really true.
Yeah.
What do we know to be true over and above everything else? And Arjuna's like, well, okay, there's a different self going on in here. Like, but still, he's like, how do I control all this stuff? I don't know how to control it. It's like, you gotta surrender. And I kind of like it because, you know, if we really break it down into regular language, it's super sweet. Like, really, it's like, you got to surrender, bro. Like, I don't know how else to tell you. Like,
definitely, that's how I feel when I hear it. I know we've spoken about this word surrender on this podcast before, and the connotations that it sometimes has. But I love that your relationship with it is sweetness, because that's what it actually is. When you go to what it's trying to portray from the Krishna conscious perspective, it's a loving relationship. You're surrendering to love. You're not surrendering at war. You're surrendering. That's the idea. That's the highest ideal, at least, is that we are surrendering to love. But even before that, perhaps, before we get to that, we're surrendering with our intelligence to something that we know is going to be good for us. And that takes humility. It takes a little vulnerability to say, I'm not in control. I don't know everything. There is something greater than me. We don't like to admit that sometimes.
We hate it because it means I'm not the boss. And we've been trying to be the boss. So like, how can I be the boss if I need help?
Yeah, and we're trained in today. I feel like we're trained in modern culture to take the attitude, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
I'm the boss of my own life. I don't need no one. I don't need anything. There's a current of that in modern thinking. Is that just me?
No, there definitely is. And I've kind of like found these little nooks and crannies. Like there's a woman, she's an activist. She's like a big speaker, motivational speaker. Her name is Marianne Williamson. And she did a few books on this one book called A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's actually from kind of a Christian perspective, but I found as I read through it, it's so universal. It just kind of showed me that spirituality is so incredibly universal that
hell yeah, it is.
There really are no boundaries, save and except the ones that we put there.
Right.
So she was saying that within this Course in Miracles, and hers was a study on this old volume, which was A Course in Miracles. So it's like a purport on A Course in Miracles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like commentary on this book. Yeah. And so one of the things that was said was like, in a Course in Miracles, miracles can only begin when we understand that we need help from a power much more high and superior to our own. And I was like, yeah, that's the definition of surrender. This is exactly what until we get to that point where we feel like, okay, I need help. There's no way around it. I can't ignore this.
Yeah.
That's when the miracles start. And I think, I think you and we had like a Facebook interaction. And I think you were asking the question, you're like, but why is it that we have to be brought to this place where we're like on our knees, like brought to our knees, completely frustrated before we ask for help?
Oh yeah. Oh really? I don't remember that. So when was this, last year?
Yeah, it was like something, it was like
Did
it was like last year, which I kind of loved.
was that a question I put on one of your posts?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
and I loved that question. One, I also loved it because I know you and I never get like a combative, challenging like vibe from you. It's always just
Yeah, yeah.
genuine, like help, like what's happening?
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
I
love it.
think, it has to do with that big boss energy. As long as we think we're the
Yeah.
big boss, we're not going to surrender and ask for help. But the minute that we're
Yeah.
so frustrated that we can no longer ignore that we are not the boss, we start asking for help. We start going into this vibe of surrender, and then miracles start happening, like magic occurs. And it's like, why do we have to be brought down to this level? It's because we have such big boss energy that like it takes so much to finally get us to acknowledge that, okay, hold on, like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I'm not the center of the universe. And even with Arjuna, like it takes a fratricidal war and him actually looking at it face to face, going, whoa, hold up. I think we should rein this in a little bit. Like, let's take a step back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's rethink this whole thing. So yeah, I think that Bhagavad Gita is wonderful because when they say metaphor for life, sometimes we can think it's a little bit sacrilegious, right? Like infidels, like don't ever compare yourself to these high personalities. But what's it for?
Yeah.
This is what it's for. So that
Bring it
Krishna,
down to earth. We have
yeah.
to.
I mean, this is what the whole thing, the whole point. Krishna is like, I've said it before, and somehow or other, it got all wonky and weird, and now I got to come say it again. So yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
this is the whole purpose of it. This is exactly what this is for. Should we be sitting there looking at Arjuna's situation and comparing our situation? Yes. Also, should we have an idea that his situation is still a lot bigger than what we're dealing with? Yes. Sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Because if you are a refugee from a different country or whatever the case is, yeah, your life looks like a battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be able to have a God that can relate. I really enjoy Krishna consciousness and the Vedic perspective because I have a God that can relate.
Right.
I don't have a God where I'm like, I tell them all my problems and they're just like,
That's
that's hard
beautiful.
for me to understand.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I never thought about it like that before. That God can relate to us. He understands. Which is very sweet. And again, it ties into personalism. He's personal.
Yeah.
Which makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, are there questions?
Well, there's definitely been some interaction on YouTube. I'm not sure if you can see the page. Where's my mouse gone? There it is. Let's have a look. There's no questions. There's been some nice comments. So again, Vina, so happy to join you. So happy you're joining us. Manjari for Life is here. Nice to see you. Narayan Biswas. Manjari for Life says, examining our motive and the results this motive has on the quality of person we are. Wow, great stretch. So yeah, I didn't quite get. Did you understand that? Didn't understand that comment. Examining our motive and the results this motive has on the quality of the person. I'm struggling to catch things today. I'm a little tired.
Yeah. She was saying it was a great stretch for us to make, like examining our motives and what effect that has on us. which is something that people don't always do. So she was
right.
commending.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, there's a few nice comments here. Sonam Sharma, well, we've got Sonam Sharma saying, if it nourishes your creeper of bhakti, it's a blessing. If it doesn't feel right after, if she was, yeah. So that was, I really liked your response to that question as well, by the way, Acyuta, when I was asking you the difference between doing service and being walked all over. I really appreciate that answer as well. Gopal Bansal is there. Lileshri, miracles. Yeah, this was a great quote. Miracles can only begin when we understand we need help from something higher. Beautiful. Big boss energy, Carmela Naidu. And Silguri Solar Station, Radhe Radhe from Darjeeling, West Bengal. Radhe Radhe right back at you, Silguri. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's kind of late in West Bengal. Thanks for staying with us.
Oh yeah, wow, it really is.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, please feel free. Obviously, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of the wisdom that Acyuta has to share with us. So if you do have any questions on this, otherwise I'm just looking back at the text just to see if there's anything else in there that
we can. I was like, the next verse. We basically
let's just talk about text number 4. If anything comes in, we can address it.
Yeah, because otherwise, we average about 2 texts per episode.
Yeah, I was gonna let's see. Anyway, we can talk about it afterwards if there's a way to pull out some of the essence, because I'm aware I also don't want it to be so committing for you as well. Because I know that it's time out of your day. But we can talk about it afterwards.
It's like whatever ideas that I have, once we get into the meeting, I really honestly feel like I feel like, oh, but there's this point, and oh, there's that point, and oh my God, that's such a great question, and oh my God, it's so good. So I think I haven't put any like parameters on it must take this amount of time. I'm just kind of I'm enjoying the journey. So
okay, well, that's good to know. So let's have a look at text 4.
Yeah. Oh, best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adibhuta, material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and the moon, is called Adideva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of Sacrifice. Oof. That's cool. I like Krishna constantly does this thing. He's like, big idea. And then just when you feel like your brain's going to shut down from overload, he gives like the sweetest little sentence right at the end. So, there's like this whole big thing. You've got the whole material creation. You've got the universe. And he's like, everything is comprised within me. He's like, but also then there's me in the heart of every embodied being. Which he started off by calling Arjuna, oh, best of the embodied beings. So it's like little hints. It's like, hey, remember when I called you an embodied being? Guess where I am? I'm right there with you.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. That's it. That's beautiful. It's a very poetic verse like that, isn't it? The way he starts it.
Yeah.
The best of the embodied beings. Yeah, I love that. Sorry, just lost the text for a second. This to me is also a real supportive text for the personality of God. In the sense that he's breaking down here. So because the Gita is really, it's one of the core scriptures, right? And there are texts in here which to me are just super clear about this, about the personalism of the divine. I, the Supreme Lord, just even that sentence, I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of every embodied being, I'm called Adiyagya. So a couple things. He's not embodied.
Yeah.
number one, because he rests within the heart of every embodied being.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So there's that. He's not embodied. He's an I, the supreme Lord, and he's the Lord of sacrifice. Adi Yagya. Adi means Lord.
Yeah.
Or great, like something like that, right? Lord.
Yeah.
Great. Of Yagya means sacrifice. So this is all just supportive of, and I say that because I know there's always a strong current of impersonalism generally that I've seen amongst those seeking spirituality, because it's very easy to go that way, to this concept that we're all God. It's very easy to go that way, to feel pulled in that direction. And yeah, there's a lot of logic behind we're all one, energy, etc. You can see how that, especially if you've ever taken any psychedelics, you feel it. Not that I have, but I've heard from many people that that's something that really comes up as very clear. But so there seems to be a strong pull in that direction. But there's more. Krishna's telling us some of that more here. That he's making it, to me, that's what I see. There's a lot of clarity saying that, no, I am a person, I'm personal. And guess what? That thing exists, but there's more.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And
I like it for that reason.
I agree. There's, sometimes we can get caught up with everything and everyone is connected. And then, Krishna makes statements like this. He's like, I am an I, which means I'm a personality, but I'm not entangled like y'all. Like you guys have a thing. And even in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that with Paramatmas, there's the witness. He's like, I'm there, I'm watching, I can see it, I see you, but also like I don't necessarily have to ascribe to all the things that are going on, which kind of just makes it even better when you get into who Krishna is as his personality. Right now he's a grown-up, right? Like some 125 years old.
Yeah.
And he's,
which is quite young for that time.
Right. Like, go figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's speaking all of this elevated philosophy, but also then you get in touch with like, well, who is this Krishna person? Like, who is this guy? And then he's like, well, when I was like 3, I ran away because my mom was chasing me with a stick because I was being really bad. And it's like, but I thought that you didn't have to do any of that. He's like, I absolutely don't. I'm above it all. It's like, but you don't have a body like ours. Like, nope, no, I don't. It's like, but you were afraid of my mom. Better believe it. Like, so, for me, it gets into like, yeah, how incredibly sweet this person is. That he's like, I don't have to do any of these things. But for the people that I love, I will drop all of that. I'll drop.
I will be a little baby and I will run and cry.
That's right. I will drop the God act. I will drop the universal controller act. I'll drop it all because I love my people.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. You put it so nicely as well. Exactly how I felt. I know I made a Facebook post last year. I got into social media for about 3 months. I'm not really into it at all. And for about 3 months, I was posting things, share things that I like, share things from my heart, and tell the world what I think. And I mean, there was one post I was talking about Krishna. Why do I believe in Krishna? Why? What's my personal reason? So I posted about it. And this is one of the parts of it. Just his goddamn personal loving intimacy and just the beauty of his activities and intentions and motivations and relationships. Yeah, it's very attractive. It's so heartwarming. It's so beautiful when you go into that level of love that happens between God and his people. Like you said, he drops everything. He drops the God act. He just engages in whatever loving reciprocation his devotee wants.
And I feel like there's no surprise that the Supreme Person says, he's like, I'm going to reside in every single heart, because what we often say, it's like at the heart of things. When you get down to the heart of it, when you get to the heart of the matter, like, when you get really deep down into what makes somebody tick, into what makes someone who they are, into what they really want, into what are their fears and all of these things, like we say, you have to get down to the heart of it. And so it's no surprise that it's like, okay, drop down into that space that can be really scary.
Yeah.
That can be really off-putting. But it's kind of funny, like that's the place where you find God.
Yeah.
And God's function there is not to condemn you.
No.
Like, isn't that funny? Like he's not like sitting there just condemning you for forever. Like that's the place where he says, okay, I get it. I understand. I'm watching. I've been watching this whole thing with you. Like that purport, he's like, seated beside the individual soul is the witness of the individual soul's activities, and is the source of the soul's various types of consciousness. The super soul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witness his activities. So yeah, I kind of felt like, would I give the people I love a chance to do whatever they wanted, even if that meant like forgetting me? Like I have such a hard time letting like my friends, if they've decided they're like, oh, I don't want to be friends with you anymore, and then they like go off the deep end. I'm always like, well, what, can't I fix this? Like, can I do something about this? Now imagine that on a greater scale times a million, and there's a person that you love more than anything, and they're like, you know what, I think I gotta make it on my own. I think I'm gonna go off by myself. Like, Madhva, if you looked at like you and your wife, and if your wife was just like one day, she's like, you know what, it's been a good run, but I think I'm gonna see what else is out there. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? what do you mean what else is out there? We've been doing this for a long time. What do you mean? She's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna see what else is out there, and I'm gonna need you not to call me ever. Like, don't call, don't write, don't text, don't like remind me of our thing. I'm gonna just need you to like let me go and like find myself. Oftentimes we find ourselves like devastated when that happens, never realizing that this is what we've been doing to God the entire time.
Right.
God's been with us lifetime.
I'm thinking, yo, Sundar, you better sit your ass down, girl, and talk some sense into you.
Like, sit down. Don't go anywhere. You're like, I want to go find myself. Madhva's like, I'm going to find the duct tape.
Yeah. But I like how you brought that back. Actually, this is exactly what we've been doing. Yeah. And this is nice. This ties in. I don't know if you saw, maybe you saw, and that's why you started talking about this, but there was a question coming in from Samir on YouTube. And he was saying, he had a burning question. I've heard that Krishna can instantly provide prema bhakti, which means pure love for him. So why doesn't he just give us prema bhakti? Why doesn't he just make us love him? And then all our problems are solved, right? So do you want to say anything to that? He has a second question, but that's the first part of the question.
What's cool is, you get this person who continuously says, he's like, I'm reciprocal. If you know anything about me, I'm like a huge mirror. That's it. Like, how we approach him is what he gives back in excess, but it's how we approach him. So, it's like, why didn't Krishna give me prem bhakti? I'm like, you don't want it.
You don't want it.
We don't really want it. Is that my phone? It is.
Oh, is your phone beeping?
Yeah, but it's okay. I'll get back.
I'm concerned. I've also just, because I was running late, and we're in an apartment in Spain because we're on holiday, And I was also concerned that, anyway, it's fine. Sundari hasn't messaged me, but she may not have been able to get in. And I put my phone on silent and to the side, and I didn't check it. But I just checked now, and she's fine. Everything seems to be okay.
And she's not going off to find herself. Like,
no, I don't think so. And if she had, I wouldn't have known.
But yeah, you know.
Sorry, go on, Acyuta.
We have to ask ourselves, do I really want it? Do I really want it? Or am I giving Krishna mixed signals? Am I the one in the relationship giving the mixed signals? Like, yes, I want it today, but tomorrow I'm going to have other priorities. You know, like we have so many situations where we're like, oh, I want to be spiritual, but later. I want to be spiritual, but after university. I want to be spiritual, but after I get this job that, you know, I need. Instead of realizing that they run parallel. You know, they don't like, and I think, you know, there's a point coming up. It's like, Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna, just forget about all of your activities. But it does say that you have to run parallel with reality. And what's real is that we are more than just what we're doing right now, right here, right? We have a soul and an eternal relationship and all this stuff. We can't neglect the spirituality thinking that those priorities are higher. They can go hand in hand. They can go side by side. Don't just up and, you know, leave all your responsibilities. It's not what Krishna is saying, because he's telling Arjuna, you have loads of responsibilities. But also he's like, but don't forget who you are. Don't forget who we are. You know, don't forget who we are to one another. And I love the ways that he reminds him. He calls him Prita, oh, son of Prita. He's like, you know, just so that you remember, we're cousins. Just so that you remember, we're bros. Like, you're my homie. He tells him he's gonna do it like in so many different ways. Like, I'm gonna tell you this because you're my very dear friend. Remember? Okay. Like, you know, so I really appreciate that Krishna doesn't, he tries not to let him ever forget. But even if he wanted to forget, he'd let him. Like this whole last chapter, he's like, you know, those even who want to be atheists, I give them the understanding by which they can even forget that there's a supreme person. So why doesn't Krishna just give us Prem Bhakti? Do we really want it? What signals are we giving Krishna?
Truth, this is really embarrassing. But luckily there's some questions on YouTube, and Sundari's just messaged me. She's down at the gate. So maybe I could leave you for 1 minute.
No problem.
With the questions.
Yes.
Can you see YouTube?
Yeah, I can. Let's see.
So Samir had a second part to his question, and then we have another question which has come in from Raphael.
Cool.
But I think we may have to draw the line under the last question that's come in, because I'm going to have to leave shortly unfortunately, I have a work meeting as well. I know. There we go. And again, it is what it is. So Samir's next question was about the Pandavas and the Kauravas and why the Pandavas are addressed.
Cool.
So I'm gonna let you share that. I'm gonna be back in as quick as I can, less than a minute.
Do it. Go.
Okay.
So this question of both Pandavas and Kauravas are descendants of the king Kuru, and why are the Pandavas addressed differently, not as Kurus? Sometimes they are. Sometimes you'll see Krishna and he'll say, oh, best of the Kurus, reminding that they are all Kurus. But interestingly enough, it's Dhritarashtra who makes that distinction. Very first verse. So he says, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do? And when he says my sons, he uses Kurus. So he's like, what did the Kurus and the sons of Pandu do, being at Kurukshetra and being desirous to fight? So that very first verse of Bhagavad-gita, you know, like you've got this distinction made by this king. So the short answer is, why are they often referred to as Pandavas and not Kurus or Kauravas? It's because the Kurus didn't like it. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana did not want them being referred to in the same lineage as they were. They wanted that distinction so that it would be known that when we go and we decide to rule this kingdom, you'll know who the rightful rulers are because they're the Kurus, right? And then you've got these Pandavas who could have come from anywhere. Do they actually have a claim on this kingdom? So it comes from the Kurus themselves. And then let's see. From Raphael, thanks for joining. Raphael says, question, how do we know if we are being sincere in our practice? It can feel like I'm being sincere, but sometimes it's hard to tell if there is an underlying motive to it or not. So cool. You joined back in just when we got to the second question.
I ran.
Yeah, so this question is about sincerity. How do we know if we're being sincere or not? How do we know if there's an underlying motive? How do we know if it's fruitive activity or if it's surrender? And I think that one is a process. We shouldn't think that all it takes is just, it's one moment and then we're flipped, the switch is flipped and we no longer do things for fruitive activity and we're just always surrendered souls. The concept, it doesn't take more than a moment. The concept, the putting it into action can take an entire lifetime. It's like when we look at what they call like shadow work, when you're working on yourself and all the stuff comes up that you don't like, and you start dealing with the insecurity and the trauma and all the stuff. They call that shadow work. And then you think, okay, I did that last month and it should be done. No, it continues to come up because, we continue living.
Annoyingly, very true.
Right?
Very, very true.
So it's going to keep.
I did that already.
I know. Yeah. So this idea of sincerity and even of surrender is going to come up again and again. It's going to be a question that's always on there. And what I like is that my friend, my supreme friend, that's kind of like their department. They handle that. My job is to try. Mm-hmm. Just try. And I don't always succeed. There are things that look like services, but the perks are very nice. So, like you look at it and you're like, oh, that was a service. And the perks of that service were great.
Yeah.
And so it's hard not to acknowledge that. And then I try to add in some gratitude and really take it back. Like, you know what? I'm super grateful for my spiritual teachers, for the author of this Bhagavad-gita, this Srila Prabhupada. I'm so thankful for my spiritual teachers because that helps me not like bring the ego in and be like, the perks are great. Look at this great thing I've done. So that gratitude helps me stay grounded. Otherwise, I can go off the deep end. But also, it helps me. It helps me to remember how to be more sincere. If I couple it with gratitude, if I pair it with who I really am, knowing that, okay, I've got my pitfalls. I may not be the most qualified person for this, but I'm going to try. That I think brings in a level of sincerity. And even like you said, this whole podcast today has been like a lesson in sincerity. Like I feel like I've just been able to watch you be so sincere and authentic and continue trying and keep showing up. That's what Bhagavad-gita is about to me.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Acyuta. I'll take that as a compliment.
No, it is. It's just like, you know what? If you were ever thinking everything in this spiritual practice has to be perfect, it has to be this, has to be done at this time, in this way, in this. Nope. No, it's about, okay, look, stuff is popping up. Can we go with the flow? Stuff is popping up. How can we serve one another? How can we be there for one another? Really sincerely. And so I really I applaud it. Like you were showing us in real time and just kind of like going with it. You're like, oh my God, I hate to do this, but now something else is popping up, but I got to like balance this whole thing. And I'm like, cool, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Well, you're a legend, Acyuta. Like I said, you're so cool because you take it all in your stride too. It doesn't faze you. The fact that I was flustered and whatever at the beginning. So I appreciate that as well. And to me, that's also a sign of the Bhagavad-gita, the lessons of the Gita in practice, is your level of understanding and compassion that you're able to apply to situations like today. I appreciate you.
All my appreciation. I really love it. And, you know, I feel like I almost want to promise. I'm like, you know, we'll do 3 verses next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
actually, when I was looking at it, when I first looked, I was like, I have chapter 8. Chapter 8 isn't very long at all. Like, I was like, gosh, how come I got one of the shorter ones? And then I feel like immediately after that, God's like, do you want to dive in? Fine, no problem. It'll take a while. Go ahead. Like,
oh, Krishna heard that, Acyuta. You can bet your bottom dollar. He heard that.
yeah.
To our great fortune. Forgive me, Acyuta, forgive me, dear friends, as well. I feel as though right now we could keep going on. I can see there's lots of beautiful comments coming in on YouTube, some of gratitude. I'm not sure if there was any more questions. However, for myself, I have some work which I have to now. I have a meeting, a work meeting, which I have to go to. So we'll have to pause today's episode here. But it's so nice. It's been so wonderful spending this time with yourself, Acyuta, spending this time with the Gita, and for all of the interaction that we've had today as well, which has been super awesome. So thank you everyone who's with us, who's been with us for today's episode. It's really been an absolute pleasure. Again, forgive the lateness, etc. We've addressed it. Acyuta has been very kind about how she's spoken about it. I appreciate that as well. And I look forward to our next episode, which is going to be in 2 weeks from today, where we will continue. Perhaps we will get through 3 verses. We'll see. We seem to go, what's happening here? There's been different dynamics as we've gone through this podcast with different hosts, the different speakers that have been on. And what I'm seeing here is that we're taking the time to just go deep into whatever it is that we're talking about. And I'm really appreciating it. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of value in it and in the content that is being shared through the podcast by doing that. For myself, I'm feeling there's a lot of value there. And it seems to me like it's reflected in also how there's interaction, etc. So I think it's a good thing.
No, thank you. And I feel like, you know, I've gotten a deeper appreciation for a chapter that I just kind of like, let's go to the 9th one, confidential knowledge, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll go there too.
Right. Really, it's like Bhagavad-gita. It's a course on life, really.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna end it here for the live stream, and for all of you listening, we'll see you in 2 weeks. You can also join us in the Zoom room if you like. That's why we do it in Zoom, so it gives that potential to increase the personalism. If you ever want to ask questions afterwards as well, we can speak to each other live. So we share the link for the Zoom on all of our social media pages through Kirtan London. So keep an eye out there. We hope to see you there. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Much love.